thing, Jason. There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Perfect. So yeah,
Okay.
sorry about that. We forgot to tell you about
No,
that.
thank you. Okay, I'd like to go ahead and call the Park and Rec Commission Advisory Commission meeting to order on Thursday, May 18th, 2023. First item on the agenda, calling meeting to order and roll call.
Yes, Commissioner D'Amico,
Present.
Commissioner Courtney, Commissioner Ainsworth, Vice Chair Tensher, Chair Sherman.
Here. Okay, and now if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, the members that are here.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, is there a motion to make adoption of our agenda for tonight's meeting on the 18th of May, 2023?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And next item, approval of our last meeting that we had on March 16th, 2023. Any corrections or anything that was amiss to make this, or looked good to me? Anyone care to make a motion to accept our minutes?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Second? Okay, thank you. Passed on that one. Okay, item number 6, we have public
You
comment.
got to vote, Carol.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Pardon. Out of practice.
We had a motion, we had a second, and then we'll vote on the minutes. Oh, did you already record everybody aye? Okay. All in
that
favor?
works.
Aye.
There we go.
Excellent. Okay.
Moving right along.
Moving right along. Yes. Okay. Number 6, we have public comments that it's not listed on the agenda. And I know Tuesday we got an email from Whitney Diver McAvoy.
We did, Chair Sherman, that's related to item 7A.
Correct.
So
That
we'll
was-
read it then.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there was no other public comments. So
We did not receive any other public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, segue perfectly in. Item number 7A, we've got a guest here with us. I'd like to welcome Kelly Bond that's here with us from Blue Zones.
Yeah, I'll just introduce this really quickly. As you said, Kelly Bond is with us tonight from Upper Valley Blue Zones, and we've been working together with a small group on a marquee project for Yountville, which is one of the things that Blue Zones is working on with each of the Up Valley cities. And so Kelly will give us a broad overview of what Blue Zones is, if you don't know already, and then we'll talk a little bit about what our marquee project for Yountville is proposed to be, and get some feedback from you on your thoughts on that. So, and we'll also take public comment and then read our public comment into the record when we get to that point. So, Kelly, if you want to come on up, and I'll pull your.
And do I need to turn this? Oh, it's okay. It sounds like it's live.
It is
okay,
on.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for having me this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all. So I am here, as Sam said, my name is Kelly Bond from Blue Zones Project Upper Napa Valley. I am the public policy advocate for the team. Blue Zones Project is a health and well-being initiative, and our project geographically is focused on the Upper Napa Valley, so Yountville north to Calistoga. There are projects like ours across the country, and quite a few actually in northern and central California. So we have a lot of other counterparts that we get to work with. Our project is funded by Adventist Health as a health system. They have fully funded our project. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I'll just give a brief overview of what Blue Zones is, and then I'll dive into the marquee project and some specifics there, and then we'll have time for discussion. Really look forward to hearing from you all, get some feedback on the map and the trail markers that we've created. And then that will be the end of my presentation. So hopefully get through it pretty quickly for you all. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so Blue Zones are 5 areas of the world where demographers identified people living longest. They circled these places on a map with a blue pen, hence the blue. It does not have to do with proximity to a body of water. And so people in these areas they found were living three times more likely to live to 100. And they were living on average 12 more good years, or really quality of life years. So not only were they living a long time, lots of centenarians, but they had really good quality of life, mobile, really good social networks. They were eating well, they were moving a lot. And so people studied why were these 5 areas, why did they have people that were living such a long time? And so you can go to the next slide. And so they took away 9 commonalities, which are up here. I'm not going to go through all of them tonight, but I'll focus just on the top one there, moving naturally. And so they really found that people in those blue zones did things like gardening. That was a form of physical activity that was kind of part of their day. Or they walked to a grocery store, or they biked somewhere. A lot of people, centenarians even, were still biking around to go visit family and friends, and they were doing it with relative ease. And so as Blue Zones Project, we really try to focus on the environment in which we live and to affect and change that environment by working individually, engaging people in the community, and also by policy and by places, and working with places. And so part of our Marquee project in Yountville, as Sam said, we do a Marquee project in all of our 3 communities. So Calistoga, St. Helena, and Yountville will do a Marquee project in all 3. The Marquee project we see as anything that's a physical change that you can kind of see in the environment. So it could be a new protected bike lane. Or in our case here, we're talking about physical maps that we can have printed and displayed, and some trail marker signage, which I'll dive into. But that is the Marquee project that the community of Yountville has chosen. That was not something that Blue Zones decided to do, but rather in our initial planning phases, when we came into the community, we said, hey, what are you all working on? What do you want to work on? How can we help? And so we created our strategic plan that way, and this was identified for Yountville as the Marquee project that you all would like to work on. So that's kind of the origin there. And then up on the screen here, this is what we call our life radius. This is what I was just speaking about, kind of touching people, places, and policy. So those are the 3 Ps where we try to impact people, their communities, the environment, the places that they work, schools, faith-based organizations, things like that. But the radius, looking at, kind of a 5 to 10 mile radius around where someone lives, and how do we touch those places, because people likely are spending most of their time within that radius. And so you can really have a big benefit health-wise if you're able to make some healthy changes to those areas. And so not only do we work on some walkability items like the map and what I'll talk about today, which falls under our built environment policy, but we also do food and tobacco policy. So I won't talk about those tonight, but just kind of as an FYI, those are other policy areas that I get to work on with Yountville. You go to the next slide. All right, so time to talk about the actual Marquee project. I'll give you a little background on what we're talking about tonight and kind of how we got to where we are. So you all should have copies of a map that's larger printed version that Samantha put at everyone's seat, and then some 3 design ideas for signage. And so the map was meant to really highlight the amazing walking trails that Yountville already has, that a lot of the community is aware of, but not everyone. For visitors as well, but really a focus on residents. How can we make sure that the residents of Yountville are aware of all these connectivity points, and how can they, walk to the library? We have that on here, or the post office. How can people walk to get around and encourage more natural movement in their daily lives? And also for fun, if you want to just go on a nice morning walk with a dog or a friend, that's also great as well. And then the trail marker signage, those 3 design options, those are really meant to, like I have a photo on the slide here on the right, be adhered to existing posts. So I sent the consultant that did the design work photos of what your signage already looks like, so that he could be kind of sensitive to the context and what the design already entails. And so hopefully we came up with something that, the color scheme kind of matches with the community, and then, is going to be on most likely wooden posts. And so how we got to where we are today, we initially started by convening a group of key stakeholders. So Samantha was very instrumental in that, as well as Whitney from the Chamber of Commerce, and we had some other folks this is what the community wanted to do. How do we make it happen? How do we get to having an actual map? The consultant that Blue Zones worked with to do this design, we provided him the art walk that you all have with some other maps, the Parks and Paths map that the town has. So really compiling from a bunch of different places, how do we overlay those existing things and put something together that the community can use. And so not only could you have a version of this map kind of available in the Chamber of Commerce or here today in Town Hall, but you could also have this kind of printed out at a larger scale, like the photo on the left there, at some select locations around the community so people walking around can see it. So it could be used in a couple different ways. And so we kind of went back and forth with the consultant. We shared different versions of this with our core team to make sure it was meeting the needs. What was the consultant not aware of? We made some changes throughout, and we'll probably continue to do that as we hear feedback from you all today. But want to make sure that this is truly representative and what the community would like, and we want it to be useful. So I think with that, you can go to the last slide. And so what I'd now like to do is just open it up to you all. If you have questions for me or feedback, I have a pen and I will just mark up my map and the trail marker designs. And then the next step, hopefully if you all are in support of some version of these items, we can move this on to Town Council. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Kelly. So I did just want to point out before we do open up to discussion. So when we say well, how did the community say they wanted this? So it was something we were already kind of discussing before we entered into the master planning process, but it did come up from the community in the master planning process. And so although we haven't formalized that plan, obviously we're taking advantage of our relationship with Blue Zones to, maybe even check something off the list sooner than later. So we did hear from the community an interest in more trail markers that helped people understand how far it is and more formal walking routes. So that was part of it. I also wanted to point out there's a lot of conversation in the community regarding access to the veterans home. And so when you look at this map, it does indicate that there are some walking routes in and about the home. And we do want to keep those in there because obviously there are home members that live up there, and to be able to educate them on there's a loop from the home down to Veterans Park and around and whatnot, I think is really important. But what Kelly and I discussed was differentiating what would be considered more private type property where you or I who do not live on the property would not necessarily have walk-on access. So that's something that we'll work on with this design to better reflect that, because we do want to encourage Veterans Home members, as members of our community, to utilize this map getting back and forth to where they live, but also being sensitive to what sounds to be the future of access to that property, at least for the time being, is that unless you have formal business there, such as going to a baseball game or visiting someone or formally volunteering, the general public really shouldn't be accessing the property, whether it's on foot or by car. So it's not open for hiking or you're walking your dog through and things like that anymore. They've really, they're starting to really make that clear. So.
I think, Sam, if I forgot, I would like to mention the outer spatial tie-in, if that's all right. Yeah, really briefly. So you might be wondering, well, how did we come up with some of these routes on here? So there is an app that's similar to All Trails, if anyone is familiar with All Trails. I see a nod. It's called Outer Spatial, and it was launched last year in Napa County. It's throughout the country, but we brought it to Napa County. And it essentially does this, but on an app. And so there's kind of a digital version. And we, through launching that app and some kind of park-to-park initiatives wanted to highlight how can you walk from one park to another and what does it pass, can you connect to something else along the way. And so a lot of these routes, walking routes that are on here kind of stemmed from that. So there is also a digital version of this that exists through that free Outer Spatial app. So it's just kind of a nice tie-in and something that we had already done and are excited to hopefully have it part of this printed version.
Don't everyone speak at once. Okay. So shall we start with color and then maybe go to the various options? Is that an approach that could work for everyone?
Yeah, do you want to discuss the map at all or just move to the trail markers?
To me, the map is really well done, and I don't have a lot of comments on that. So I'll step back, and if somebody else has a thought on the map,
Okay.
we can go there.
Something else we discussed as well was I think it's 3, 4, 5, 6 are all very similar colors, and so differentiating that a little more so it's clearer. There's the 3 blue colors. They kind of run together on the map, so differentiating that a little bit. And then just updating a couple of the notations, but yeah, I think we're pretty happy with it too.
And Kelly, to clarify, that All Trails app that would feature this map on there, right? All Trails app?
Yeah, it's called Outer Spatial is the
Spatial,
name of
okay.
the app.
That's great.
So yeah, each of I'm happy to show you all at another time too. But on the map, you'd kind of, by your location, you'd zoom into Yountville, and then there are going to be little dots on the map that you can click on. And if you click on one of those, it'll show you the name of this route or this route. And when you click on it, then it will show you, the line and where it goes,
Good to know.
and the distance,
Yeah, it's a
and
nice
all of that.
feature, I think, 'cause people are so digital oriented and using their apps. They love them, so yeah.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to have
know.
both options since not everyone is, they don't want to use a phone. Maybe they want to use a paper map, and that's fine.
Great, thank you.
So if there's no other feedback on the map, I'll pull up some of the trail marker and we can walk through that. And yeah, just definitely looking for feedback on color and what is on them, the shape, what we think makes the most sense to our population. And then just to reiterate what Kelly already mentioned, we are a sign-heavy community. And so my intention, and we spoke about this right up front, was that I was apprehensive to do anything that would add additional posts or anything like that. So these signs would be located on what is already existing, whether that was the post leading onto a bridge or at the beginning of a path that's already existing. And so, I think we all have seen things, trail markers in different places that we've been, and the scale of those, which these are proposed to be 4 by 4 inches, which would fit onto our existing posts. So we wouldn't be looking at adding posts and signs to that scale. So.
And those, I don't think we're probably familiar with, but those are all brown, most of them with the wood.
All of our, pretty
signage
much
side.
all of our posts are wood, yes.
When you're looking at the color choices, looking like, well, that
Yeah.
brown perhaps wouldn't be
Oops, I meant to do
wouldn't
one
show
for-
up as well, because it would blend in so much with the background of it. Like I'm looking back at the doors here, from our viewpoint now, looking at if a sign was on that, it might not notice it as well,
Yeah, so.
especially if you're not familiar with the whole area.
So this is design 1, nope, that says, I'm looking at my screen, not your screen. I get so confused with the screening thing. So option 1 up here on the screen, the color palette is similar on all of them, but yeah, I think just general feedback would be great. Alan, I think you have some.
Well, just on the colors, the street signs that we have, we went to a great deal of length to choose the color of the street marker signs, especially in Old Town. I don't see that color as an option here. I don't know if it would be consistent to have that same color, or if you want this maybe to be different in some way, but that was one thought that I had.
Are we brown with white on the wood post? So
Yeah.
it's the dark brown with the white reflective writing
Yes.
on the post. Yeah, that would be our street signs.
Otherwise, a color compatible with that, so
Yeah.
Kind of like the purple myself as a contrast with the brown.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the grape also because we're a valley that sells a lot of grapes. So it can segue in. It's a pleasing color too. Although the blue for Blue Zone. So
Does it
Your
just
sign, so yeah, you get to pick.
is this one of this? So the other valley towns, so St. Helena and Calistoga, they'll also be doing the similar with the color patterns that you've got here too.
So they are not doing this type of project. So the Vine Trail is the marquee project
Okay.
for the other two communities.
I
Since it's not as
I
built
was
out.
just curious if it was something that they wanted them different in each of the locations for each of the towns different, or they wanted them to all be consistent.
You guys are going to be special. You're the only ones that are doing this
Oh,
cool
cool.
project. Yeah.
Yeah, each city has a different marquee project. So
I see.
Is it? Did you say that St. Helena and Calistoga is the Vine Trail?
Correct.
Both of them are
Yes.
are focusing on that, the extension of the Vine Trail.
these signs would be metal, I guess, metal signs or wood, because each color. Look how vibrant that is versus what we're looking at. It's kind of faded on our sheets. You know how
Yeah,
when
when
you
you-
paint a wall and stuff, and you look with lighting, and so I'm curious about the product.
So
metal.
it wouldn't be metal. It's like a composite material that it's meant to last a long time and stay vibrant. So I would say probably the color you're seeing on the screen is going to be more true than the color in the printed copy that you have.
That's great. It stands out more up there. Yeah.
So I guess I prefer option one because it gives, the only sign I can see that gives, no, the first one does too. It's a 4x4 is very small. So even though it looks kind of cool to have the arrows and the circles, it sort of makes the sign smaller in a little way, even though it probably isn't in terms of just the overall text. But I think number two, since it's just a 4x4 sign that sits on that post, it seems like the square design makes the most sense to me. And I like the circles below the arrows that give information about what's acceptable on that trail.
When I was looking at it, I went back and forth, and then option 3 kind of ended up being my best choice. I think my favorite. I know a lot of people, if they're looking, how long is it going to take me? So the timing, the minutes, and then how much the miles on it. If people are looking on their Fitbit and they want to figure out how many steps or how far I want to work on a walk today or something, that would be something visual for them.
Yeah, and that is also an option since we've been talking a lot about option 1, on the rightmost column. Is that one, do you feel like that is acceptable? It says the mileage and the minutes, or do you still prefer option 3?
I guess of the look of it, I like the option 3 because it had the graphic of the walker, and then that's just myself, and then the miles and the time, how many minutes.
Is there a reason, for example, there seems like there's 4 components here: the activity, the direction, the distance, and the time. And in some cases, it doesn't appear there's an option where they're all there in one option and one
Right.
variation.
I'm going to assume the consultant made that based on limited space and might not have felt they could put everything on one. And perhaps also to provide, I don't know, Samantha, if you would like options, some trail markers will be this, one style, but, there's like 4 different options, right? So maybe in some areas you'd want this kind and to say this thing, and other you would want something else.
To Alan's point, I mean, it makes sense if you can fit them all, if all 4 of them onto one of them. We really should be able to find a way to have that be. I think all 4 elements are important, maybe you could use sort of if the third option were, let's say, the option everybody chooses or the city wants to use, or the town wants to use, then maybe you could make that little walking person more of a watermark and just put the options on top or somewhere in that triangle, make him smaller, something like that. I mean, there's a lot of room there. That little walking person isn't as important, I don't think, as what's acceptable on the trail.
I think you could integrate into option 1 on the sides, the distance and time. I mean, there's plenty of room there. You're getting the distance, the direction, what's acceptable, the mileage, and the estimated time. I think you could incorporate all of that onto one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
To the left
like
and right
that.
side of the arrow.
Yeah.
I think if the information going back to the designer was that we'd like to see all 4 options on
Sure.
all the sign options, that would be curious to know what that looks like.
Samantha, is there any opportunity if, for example, in option 1, the designer feels you can't put, so we have direction and options in the large option 1 diagram, could that be made 5 inches by 4 inches if that was necessary? I think it'll
Yes.
fit, but
I mean, that is an option. 4 inches would be the width of most posts, which makes sense, but it could be longer.
Right.
Absolutely, 5 inches, yeah. But I think on each, the right and left side of that there's adequate space for those 2 markers, yeah.
I know this is a silly question, but are the arrows just
Direction.
things that are on there, or do those really reflect the direction of the trail?
I would hope.
They would reflect the direction of the trail. Or
I
the
know
path,
that sounded
yeah.
like a really silly question, but
Yeah,
most
so
of the
we
trails,
would.
when you see the post, the trail's there.
Yeah.
So I'm,
No.
So kind of the next step in
Yeah,
this
and
would be that we would go out and actually plot the exact location of each one, and then they
decide
would
which
be
arrow you're
ordered.
going to use.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we do have a couple places where you can go this way or that way, and so I would envision we would have to, on
Right.
different sides, you would have different arrows. So
Okay.
yeah. Does that make sense?
How
Kelly,
many, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Kelly, is it going to say blue zone anywhere on the plaque? Give you guys credit? No?
I mean, we have our logo on the map. I think for the sake
Or
of
the individual
space on
these-
the
Yeah,
on
I know.
these things.
The more things we add,
Yeah.
people are going to go, whoosh, they won't
Yeah.
see anything. Too much information.
How
But I
many?
appreciate the offer.
How many of these would there be then with the number of signs we already have existing, the posts rather?
I really have to spend some time diving into
I'm just trying to-
that part of it. Yeah.
When you
So
think
once we
about the
get
signs you see in-
a design and we're moving forward on that, it's really the next step is to go out with a map and plot exactly, where we're going to be putting these, and then, make a recommendation. I mean, some of it will be guided by the map that you're seeing as well. If we're, telling people these are kind of routes that, we have mapped and estimated, mileage and all of those things, then we'll optimize with that information to use for mile markers. So. We have a lot of access points to our path system. So I think it's going to be a fine balance between, overwhelming it and making sure it's just visible to people. And, it's something we also discussed it, for example, at Vineyard Park, which tends to be our more active park, is, maybe we have an interpretive type sign where the map lives as well. So people can, see it, signs that are made to be outdoors and not just in a bulletin board or something, but that are intentional in our park system that help people to know that, this exists. So.
It seems like this would be a perfect one in front of the post office.
Oh, it
Around
could be.
there, and we have the bulletin board area, where, sometimes
Yeah.
it's changed and the maps have been in there, but this is a good one, very good.
So it sounds like most of the feedback is we want all the elements on one if possible. We're open to maybe changing the size to be a little bit taller, longer. I heard purple from a couple people as a preferred color, but also examining the potential of matching with our street signage. Any other thoughts on?
Yeah. Any other colors?
Options
that besides the Old Town? Like purple.
Another purple, okay. A big part of the street sign issue was the reflective lettering. If you remember, all of our street signs were wood and they were mitered out and painted white lettering. And because of the fire department and different public safety things, the town had to move forward with the reflective lettering because it's important for people to be able to find you.
So did we decide or give feedback on which of the, so we want all four elements, but do we want option 1, plain white arrow, or do we want option 2, which is, kind of just a point, a general point, or do we want option 3, which is a point with maybe a person? So
2 was kind of a triangle or a circle. Well, I think we decided no on that because it cuts down on the surface area that we have to work with.
got it.
That's from what I was hearing.
Yep.
And then 3, is another option, but the walker is very prominent
Yep.
on that, which I don't know if you necessarily need that.
And I know you'd mentioned, making it more like a watermark and smaller. I do, an option 1, there is already a little person walking in the middle circle. So I don't know if you'd want to, if we change that, if we're putting a bigger person in the center, would we want to change the 3 circles on the bottom so it's not duplicative? Or do you like the arrows?
I
Well,
like
I think
I like option 1 with
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Me too.
Me 3.
It seems the cleanest to me. I think
Yeah.
if a watermark is really something, it's just kind of like there for aesthetics. Is it really meaningful?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the arrow, I think, is a purpose.
Yes.
And the arrows, it's supposed to be helpful for people that are lost, right? Or that don't know, are familiar with it, so that would make sense.
Okay. No, that's terrific feedback. Thank you. So I think next steps is we'll work on these revisions and updates. And I think what I would like to do between now and our July meeting is to better plot out our locations for these and work on finalizing the map with Kelly, and then come back to you in July with kind of our proposed locations and a revised visual for you to look at before we move forward. And then that proposal most likely will go to the town council just as an informational item. So Blue Zones is working really hard with us on the design portion of this. The actual purchase of the markers themselves, the town would undertake. So that's something that, although already budgeted for, well, it'll be approved in June, but already as part of our next year's budget. But just as an informational to the council, this is a project that we're working on, and along with many others with Blue Zone. So it's been a really terrific partnership. I think some of you have taken some of the classes that we've offered with Blue Zone's cooking and the purpose workshops and the walking Moai program. And so, and that's just continuing to build. If you are at the Chamber of Commerce event, we are formally now, I think, a Blue Zone city, right? Or what did we get? What happened
The
there?
chamber was honored as
Chamber was
a
honored.
recognized
Blue
Work-
Zone's
yeah.
workplace.
Workplace.
And the
Workplace.
town is working on that. So
Yes.
we have a group of employees who are on a committee to for town employees to then also be a Blue Zone's workplace. So,
Nice.
but we're working on, we want to be a Blue Zone's city. We want to be on the big blue map.
You will be.
It's very nice to you guys include us in this. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for
Thank
being
Thank
here.
you all
Kelly.
so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Appreciate it.
Were you going to read Whitney's
Oh, yes, please.
letter
Public
into
comment.
the record?
Thank you, Alan.
Yep.
Thank you for the reminder. Yes, we did receive one public comment from Whitney Diver McEvoy, and she said, "Dear Commissioners, Youngville Chamber of Commerce would like to express support for Blue Zone's project, Upper Napa Valley's Marquee project. This project will create a walking path map for the community, along with trail marker signage to encourage residents and visitors to travel more by foot. With a mission of enriching the vibrancy of our community, the Yountville Chamber of Commerce is excited to partner with Blue Zones Project and the town of Yountville on this project. In collaboration with community stakeholders, Blue Zones Project has designed a walking path map and trail marker signage for fabrication and installation by the town. Signage will be installed on existing posts throughout the town, and larger maps posted at selected locations along the downtown corridor. The Yountville Chamber of Commerce looks forward to supporting this project by printing and distributing paper maps to have in the Welcome Center and incorporate the map into existing promotional materials. The Yountville Chamber of Commerce values building a thriving community and promoting Yountville. We believe this project will bring numerous health, environmental, and economic benefits to our community. We encourage the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission to support the project and to recommend it move forward to Town Council for review. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Eddie, for reading that to us. So do we need to take a vote to support it, or don't we just?
No vote tonight,
to...
just feedback, and then we'll come back with
Okay.
more information at your July meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. All righty. Next agenda item for this evening is, pardon me, get back to here, is going to be a 7B update on the Park and Rec, another big project Samantha's got going on here.
Yeah, so I've been working on this, and I felt like I keep talking to you about it, but I wanted to kind of show you where we're heading. I just want to be clear that it's a very draft form of a document at this point, but we've talked about it for so long, and I just, not that I don't think you don't think I'm working on it, but just to share with you kind of some of the information that, we've been working so hard on gathering, and then tell you kind of what the next steps are, because I think by July we should have pretty close to what will be that draft document for you to review with those really important pieces, which is, what are the goals that we're talking about for the future based on our community input process and how we see that moving forward into the future. So the draft document that I provided included pretty much everything that we've been working on. It includes everything up into that point, which is the plan itself for the goals, policies, actions, how we prioritize those, and how we look at any future proposed projects and plan for those. But I think, it's kind of interesting even up until this point, the document, and I just want to explain that considerable time went into those historical document parts. And it wasn't just necessarily finding those, which could be a challenge. It's also reading through all of them and analyzing them to really capture the history of our parks and spaces. And so there's other things that I still am looking for that I haven't found yet, but I'm working on it. And we find these gem documents in the strangest places in our document management system. So it's very much like a treasure hunt. But I've learned things. I mean, I've only been here 13 years, and if Alan or someone who's been here for a very long time learns something new by something that I found, I'm going to be very excited. But I more so just wanted to share with you how it's moving forward and get any feedback from you or thoughts on how it's laid out or designed, or if you found inconsistencies or things that don't make sense or that aren't true. From your historical input, so that I'm able to, capture that and make those changes as well. So that's basically it. There's really no action or anything. It was more of just for you to have a sneak peek of what we've been working on and then give any feedback that you might have.
Kudos to you. And this is it's unbelievable. Just looking at it and all the information that we've got out of this,
And I assume, Sam, when it's complete, then somebody from the town can come into here and ask and say, could I see it?
Absolutely. It'll live on electronically on our website, but it'll also live in hard copy. We have we have a hallway inside Town Hall where kind of the historical type documents and plans live, and that it'll live there in its hard copy form as well.
That first paragraph, community and geography, somehow to focus that on either with people coming into town or even people that live here. 13 acres of parks, all that is in this little town. I mean, because you think it's really nothing, and we do quite well.
We do, and I think when you look at that comparison that NRPA does, the National Recreation and Parks Association, so every year I get a survey that asks, because, Yountville's, my survey's easy because we're pretty much built out, so we're not adding a lot of parkland, but larger cities, obviously, it may change from year to year, but then you go up into this, master database where you're looking at what is the national standard for these things, and then how do you compare? And I think that Yountville compares very well. So.
Sure.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Or like, of course, I know you all are going to be here forever and ever and ever in your jobs, but this information at the back about what's at each park, and to go check on it yearly, or if things need to be looked at every 6 months, or new things put in. I like that feature. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, so we're working, I'm going to be working with Jacob Solis in our Public Works Department, because I think we have an inventory management system, and so how, this could potentially be integrated into that, and then, trying to find when things were installed and, what we estimate lifespan to be and stuff is kind of the next step in that process. But, yeah, it was nice to know we have, this many benches in our park
Right.
system. And
Really?
That whole section, that had to take, talk about time consuming. You just imagine your checklist of going through the parks.
Karen did that for me.
Oh, you did,
Karen
like,
Cole.
The
yeah.
mutt dispenser. I just had to laugh each time whenever I look, and you look and see, where's it at? And the things here.
And that does not even capture in any realm how many mutt mitt dispensers we have in town. Those are just in our parks.
Yeah. But it's just like Kathy was saying, the history of everything in here. I mean, I do notice people, when I'm going by Vandeleur Park, that people are stopping and they're reading the plaques,
Yeah.
reading the stories about that. So it's nice to see that people take advantage of that.
And I'm going to ask Leo to show me, but from what he's told me, there are still existing very old rose bushes that are most likely originally planted by Mrs. Vandeleur. Not all of those roses lived that long, but he said that there are some, so I'm interested to know which ones. So a lot of history.
I'd be interested too, but the ones I remember are mostly the climbers
Yeah.
that are closest to Jefferson Street. Most of the others seem to be newer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just go back to the community and geography part? When you get to the final draft of this, I think it would be cool to see that visually represented, because that's a big thing to have. Like when the data about how many parks per individual in town, and just all of the information that's connected to that, it would be really cool to be able to see that at a glance.
Okay.
Because I think it's a huge plus.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
a powerful statement about how the town is trying to support community life, and so that would just be my only kind of suggestion related to that information. If we could sort of put it on a map or represent it somehow visually, I think it would be really cool.
Yeah, that whole page there, I've got the highlight as well.
Right.
That is really interesting.
Yep.
Especially, I'm thinking for the marketing for real estate.
Yeah. Make
I know
it
they
easy
do.
for them.
Yeah,
And I don't know, you may not know the answer to this, or I don't know, maybe some of you do. How come the census is down so low at the Veterans Home? Does anyone know?
So they, it's been a while, but they went from double dorm rooms to individual rooms at some point for their independent living. And so that's the new standard. But my understanding, we had a recent meeting, I think they're at like 580, I want to say, down. When I first came here, it was over 1,200, I believe. And so that is part of it. It's also that our veterans that want and need those services are aging to the point where they need a higher level of care, which means there's less of that available, which is part of their SNF that they're building, the new SNF. But I think we're probably looking at somewhat of the new norm for that campus is most likely going to be around the 600 mark, is my understanding from the presentation we received. So.
But they're still getting budgeted for the higher number. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about that, but it could be. Yeah, so I think that that's all being analyzed, is my understanding.
So on page 9, where it says the home is budgeted for 876 beds, residents, but currently housing under 500, you don't mean fiscally, that's not a fiscal statement there. That's more like
So that's
the
right out of
capacity.
their.
Is that a capacity statement, or is that about fiscal? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so that's right out of their recent master plan document, and I would read that to believe that it is financial, but that could be a good clarifying question.
If they've had that kind of money, I know that money gets allocated in different ways for different things, but that place needs so much modernizing. I wonder why they don't.
I'm thinking they have another vision for it in the future that they don't want to tell us
The
about.
business development model.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Oh, and
I think that what we heard loud and clear was that it doesn't, regardless of what they want or what we want, whatever goes in up there has to first and foremost serve the veteran population. And so housing would have to be employee housing that supports veterans. I think you may have seen there's an RFP out for reuse of the Holderman Hospital when they vacate it, but that use has to be veteran serving use. So it's not like, a hotel could come in and say, I'm submitting a proposal to take over the building as a new hotel. So it's fairly limited in scope what can happen up there, at least at current. So. And I spent some time on that and included that. I mean, the Veterans Home is a part of our population. And I think that, some people don't know the level of services that are provided up there, and also the level of care that the population is coming to. Those people don't tend to come out and down to participate in things, especially if they're living in a skilled nursing facility or something like that, which is starting to become a higher number of their population than those that are living in the independent side. So it really does kind of change the landscape of Parks and Recreation a little bit, and what that expectation of service for the veterans is as that population changes. So.
Samantha, I had some questions that I just wanted to go over, and then maybe I could just leave this with you for some typos
Perfect.
and things like that.
Thank you.
So in the executive summary on page 6, the last sentence is left hanging. It says, this plan will be the first of its.
Okay.
And I'm just curious what it's the first of, if you can recall off the top of your head.
It's the first of its kind.
Got it. Kind.
It's the first of its something. No, but it is the first formal master plan in Parks and Recreation that the town has entered into. So historically, all I could find were more site-specific plans, mostly around the community center.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Then in the next paragraph, 2 acres of open space. I'm wondering if that is an agglomeration of things like along Hopper Creek, or where that might be.
Yes, it is. It's not one area of space. It's a conglomeration of small pieces of space. And I can analyze that more and break it out with Rosalba's help, most likely. So, small areas that we maintain, but not as active parks or anything like that.
Well, there's some of the nicer parts, as you walk along Hopper Creek. It's just really special. Under demographics, estimated population, I think I find it hard to believe that if I add the first 4 numbers of people in town under 19, Yeah, I have a really hard time with this data, which is formal
census data. And so I can count myself children under the age of 5 that exceed that. So I think that I think there are flaws in our last census.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily have the pool to correct that. But,
No.
but I do. And I think that there's different information out here where these numbers are skewed, different ways. So,
just kind of our working conversation is that we have 37 children in town under the age of 18, and that number looks like well north of 250.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
so in terms of credibility for the document, I don't know, you might think about that. There's also, in terms of the population by race, I think there's some issues there. And then I appreciate David's comment about the veterans home, because that's a curious one for me too. On page 10, where we're talking about home ownership, I'm curious whether the Picasso equivalent that we might have in town, if that's factored in one way, shape, or form. Because as I go down, let's see, Mulberry and Larkspur, they're just, it's very interesting. And I've heard from some of the residents in that area that some of those houses are owned in that way. Is there any way to get a read on that?
I'll have to check with our planning department if there's a way that we're able to differentiate multi-owner properties.
Because those would not show up, if I understand correctly, in your 30-day rental housing stock.
No.
So can you tell me more about that? Did you say Picasso?
Picasso is joint ownership, several
It's like
people. You buy
timeshare,
shares.
like a timeshare kind of a, or is
Well,
it?
they specifically don't want to be known as a timeshare because there's laws against that in many cities, but they get around it by they sell off 1/8 maybe ownership of a
So
property.
fractional ownership?
Fractional
Is that
ownership,
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
which we don't technically allow, but I think if you were to come and buy a piece of property with 4 of your siblings or friends, I mean, that's legal, right? But
Yeah.
for Picasso to go and advertise a home as 1/8 fractional ownership, I think there's a lot of issue around that.
It's been in the news in St. Helena recently that there was a lot of uproar from residents. Because
It
Picasso was-
definitely changes the complexion of a neighborhood. It's
far
one
as
thing
second home,
to
it's not a second
have
homeowner.
second home ownership where,
It's one family.
but also where it's a second home and they're half the time here, half the time not. That changes, as I think so rightly pointed out in the documentation here, changes the complexion of town, but then so does fractional ownership in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll ask the question. I'm not sure. I think that, we're quite limited on the information that we have. I tried several different angles to try to quantify second home ownership. And, Erica worked with me on, pulling water bill data because I was like, oh, well, if they don't live here
Excellent. Yeah.
year round, then,
Yeah.
we should have a significant drop in water use. But that's not really the case because we tend to irrigate a lot here in town, regardless if we're home or not. So it wasn't a good quantifier. We're still, I think, trying to figure out how do we better, track that. And it's not illegal to be a second homeowner and to only be here a couple weeks. There's nothing to say that that's not something people can do. It does just definitely change the landscape of a community when you have a significant number that aren't here. Pretty
this
in the
is a-
school and declining enrollment and all of those things that we're seeing is, a part of that.
Exactly, and more importantly to this work, it has impact on this work. So to understand its trend and its magnitude, I think, is important. Go ahead.
I say that part, especially when you're talking about the programs that the Park District offers, and when the demographics, the median age group, because there's not many families, so there's not as many kids. They're not here, so the programs and the people that are here are 40, 50, 60-ish. So the programs that you're offering for the adults, although they're the ones you have for that, but that's...
Yeah, and I know, I mean, I can think of probably at least 20 people off the top of my head that started out here as second homeowners, and now they live here full time because that was part of their plan. And so, but it's also, you know, how do we use that data to plan for what we're going to be doing in the future? So.
I had one last question regarding the Bartizano Park history. The park says here at the end of the first paragraph, the park was developed by Yountville Investors, LLC, and the town reimbursed for those improvements totaling $100,000 when the parcel was transferred into town ownership in 2009. I'm not exactly sure
what that means. So the developer actually put in all of the improvements. They put the path in and all of the foliage, you know, everything that you see there was actually up until to the parking space there at the community hall and the lawn. They actually did all of that work and paid for it themselves. And so then the town reimbursed them up to a certain amount of money, which was that $100,000 when the property transferred.
Yeah, I think if we add the word them before for, then it becomes sense. I'll just give you my document here. But
okay. Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, though. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I recall something about that, but I just wanted to be made.
Yeah, it's not very common that happens like that, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, but it did. Yeah. No, I look forward to your notes, though. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, most of them are very trivial. It's just wrong word in the wrong spot.
It's a great document, though, Sam. I think I think residents will really enjoy looking at it.
I feel like it's
especially
interesting.
About the parks and just the whole big portion of it.
And I think so next steps for me, like I said, are really honing in on coming out of the public input process, which, you know, you've seen that, all that information. And what it tells me is we're doing a lot of things right. And there's some things on the list. And so what are those things and how do we start incorporating them into, you know, our five-year plan or so? And I think it's good timing. I feel like the council is very supportive of Parks and Recreation as a whole and the impact that we make on the community. And are excited to, you know, invest in that continuing. So I think it's all very good timing to position for the next 5 years to check some of those things off. And I don't, you know, I think there's concern. You know, there were, when that document first came out that recapped all of the public input process, there were concerns about very small things. And, you know, it's like, no, we're not going to do that there. And, I think that the community will be happy to see, you know, that the goals we're coming out with are not huge and robust changes to anything. It's, you know, small things and, you know, one kind of what I would see as a large scale capital improvement, which would be the dog park, you know, and I'm going to spend some time recapping the history of that process that we've already had in town and then discussing, you know, what we could potentially do going forward. But, I look forward to the new town manager coming on and hopefully with the council is continuing the process on the school property to see how we can have that stop being just a empty piece of bus parking in our community and, you know, how we can make that a viable piece of the community. So, but that's kind of the next steps.
Yeah.
That my goal is to have this to you in July.
Okay. I just really check on the mile marker and trail path as a park and fill one of your recommendations. Is that?
Yeah, it's already in there.
It's already.
Yeah, that great.
Yeah, it's very timely, and I think it is interesting to think back. Though one of the first things we did when I came here 13 years ago was dedicate the mile of the Vine Trail. So then now, you know, it's expanding up Valley and they're getting support to do that. And I think, wow, we've been 13 years ago, we were on board with that and the town, you know, invested highly in that project. So it'll be really exciting to see that northern expansion. So.
And then after our July meeting for that, then from reading this, then at some point then we'll have, because the community, kind of like we had with the consultants, a community meeting to go over this. We'll be more done at Park and Rec at our commission meeting. So if public
Yes.
want comments.
So we'll make sure, and when we're bringing the draft plan, it will probably be coming out at least 2 weeks prior to your July meeting to you and the public, and then a real invitation to the public to join us at that meeting to give feedback and hear the presentation. And then based on that, if there are changes and things that the commission wants to see, then it'll come back again to you before it moves forward to the council for their review. So, at the very least, there will be 2 formal ways that the public can weigh in on this. And then, of course, there's always the informal ways, which is, just talking to me or, discussing things. But public comment and watching or attending our meetings here is a good way of weighing in.
Thank you.
But I anticipate giving you at least 2 weeks to review that prior to your meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
I just have 2 more questions. Once this master plan lives in the real world that everybody, for the organization, then is it a 3-year plan? Is it a 1-year plan? Is it a 5-year plan? What's the plan on the plan?
So the plan on the plan, really based on what I see as the goals, would probably be a good 5-year plan.
5-year plan?
Yeah.
And would you include in your fiscal portion a 5-year projected budget?
We could. It's going to be pretty rough, but I think what then that turns into once the plan is approved is how does it fit into our capital improvement budget, or plan, which is something we review every year at council level, and how do we build it in. And typically it's if it is the development of a dog park, usually there's a year where it's the design piece, and then the next year is we fund the project itself. So costs are all over the place, and the dog park, because we don't have a site specific, will probably not be a very accurate estimate, but we'll give it a shot because we don't have a site for that project.
And then would the Blue Zone project eventually land in this plan as part of the?
So since we already
Recreations.
note in there that the mile marker part came up during the process, I'll just probably note that and give an update that that's already in process and here's how we're working on it. Yeah.
Okay.
Through the chair, can I make a comment on it? I appreciate the sneak peek. I think it's obvious that it's going to be a lot of effort. The vice chair's comment still resonated with me because I went down the same rabbit hole. And so when you're contemplating all that public engagement, the last thing you want is a lot of focus and a lot of dialogue surrounding home ownership statistics. And then I looked at the same that you looked at. I looked at the 20 to 49 band was 30 years. And then some of them were 4 years. And I'm looking at that chart and I'm saying, is it necessary, or is it going to have a whole bunch of people who would otherwise be able to contribute to the conversation getting caught in that rabbit hole of, wait a second, these numbers don't quite add up, So I did the exact same thing. I looked at both of those. I'm like, okay, so, because you can't help but do that. I'm like, oh, so we can figure out where the water bills are sent, and then we can make assumptions based on that. But that wasn't really the meat on the bone for to make a great plan. So I just thought maybe because it's right in the front, maybe what's not necessary, because the next question I'm asking, well, are those our numbers and can we change them? They're not our numbers, so we can't. But you might end up being asked and having to answer that question 3 dozen times. I don't know.
Right.
I hope that comment was helpful.
Yeah.
It was intended to be. Yeah.
No, that is helpful. I mean, if to look at it objectively, like is the data relevant to the plan and does it need to be included? I think is a good conversation, good thing for me to think about.
Well, sometimes master plans are used for grant purposes and other things, right? So it would be relevant, although those numbers could be represented more as percentages of the whole instead of precise numbers in a pie chart format or something like that, just so that people can kind of see the age bands, but not get down into, I counted yesterday, and there were actually 621.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good feedback. All right.
Okay, thank you so much, Sam. Okay, on to staff information reports on 8A. I think we're next to Rosalba, right?
Yes, thank you for having me. And Sam, I have the PowerPoint on the
Just a
desktop.
second. Sorry.
Okay, Rosalba Ramirez, Deputy Public Works Director. I just wanted to provide a very short update on the status of our grant application for the Vineyard Park improvements. And the application is going to be based off of the previously chosen alternative A. Next slide, please. So, quick status update. Previously mentioned, it is currently budgeted in our CIP budget. We are applying for a LWCF grant that's due June 1st. So the remaining scope of the project hasn't changed. It's complete the design, community outreach, and construction, but also apply for the grant. We're using the alternative A, but we did add to the scope to make it not only more appealing for the grant application, but to provide more amenities for the park. And the grant will provide funds, but the town is required to provide a 50% match. So the new estimate with all the rough estimate with all the additional scope items is about $885,000, which 50% of that would have to be matched by the town. Next slide. So this is just a list of what we plan on submitting for the grant application. So it might seem a little tedious to put, wayfinding signs, but we do actually get more points if we list that we're putting wayfinding signs in the park for the grant application. So we're including additional pedestrian signs, very similar, and probably have to coordinate with the Blue Zone because those are the type of wayfinding signs we were going to include. Drinking fountains, including with the water bottle refilling stations and the pet fountain dispenser, as we see in some of the other parks we have. Trash and recycling receptacles, upgrading the floor and the equipment in the outdoor exercise gym area. So the existing floor that's there is kind of falling apart a bit, the pebble that's there. So we're going to replace that. Add some additional picnic areas and benches for rest and views. And then exploring the use of porous surfaces on those picnic areas to really utilize the ability to recharge groundwater. Bleachers around the athletic courts, and upgrading the single stall restroom to a double stall restroom with storage area. The idea is to do it very similar to what we did at the community park at north end of town. That went pretty well, and it was pretty efficient, so we're looking to try to include that. Do landscape and irrigation plan for the entire park, so that would be a formal plan that we'd put out and get input on. Gate access for the pickleball court, and then the original portion of Alternative A, which was the pathway that went around the courts. Next slide. And so this is the conceptual plan just for the grant application. So this isn't a final design. This isn't where things will be located or how many. This is really just a conceptual plan to submit for the grant application. And the listed items are the same ones I had on the previous slide. And we do make a note saying that some of these items are subject to change for the grant application. But this is what we will be submitting before June 1st for these funds. Any questions?
Who's the funding agency?
It's state, I believe.
Yeah, it's a land and water conservation fund. And typically it's an annual funding cycle for this grant. And it was a very similar one, but it was a per capita grant that we received that paid for the bathroom at Yountville Community Park. From what our grant consultants say, we should be pretty well positioned.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody else?
What are you thinking of for porous surface?
Something that we can easily maintenance and repair. So I definitely don't want a giant slab of porous surfaces, because once you get to the maintenance point of that, if you have to seal it with anything, it removes the porousness of it. So possibly some sort of sections of porous rock or porous material that if something breaks, we can take it out, put it back in. So preferred something easy to maintain that won't lose the porous portion of it. But we will be putting that out to kind of get feedback from experts when we're going in the design to see also what would look best for the area.
Yeah. It's underneath the picnic area wouldn't be super high traffic, but one of the thoughts that comes to my mind is the open cinder block type pavers,
Yeah.
not with plants growing out of them the way you see some driveways done,
Yeah.
but might be something worth considering.
And those pavers are what kind of I had in mind, because you can replace the individual
Exactly.
pavers
Exactly.
as they fall apart or need maintenance. So
Yeah, the only question in my mind would be what kind of substructure do you have to do to keep the pavers from
Yeah.
shifting, and whether that impacts the porosity, but there seem to be billed as being porous.
So that's usually what's taken into consideration with those pavers, is that even the subsurface, even the compaction, even the material we put underneath still allows for the water to get through. So
Good.
So go ahead.
The time frame then, once it's the minutes, once they review all of them, is it like 2 months or so that we find out, or is it less?
the applications are due June 1st.
Right.
And we don't know the exact date that they will announce the funds, but it could take 6 months. Usually it's around like the new year or their fiscal year that they announce it. So if we estimate, say, January 1st of the new year, they announce who received the funds. Then I think I believe this grant does have a certain amount of time that we have to utilize the funds, which we want to utilize the funds, so we won't have a problem taking care of that.
Thank you. Any other
It's
questions?
exciting. We hope to come
Yeah.
back to you in January and say, we got the
Got the
grant.
money.
Always.
Yes. Oh, any other questions before she goes on to her next Public Works general update?
Okay, so right now, one of the projects that we're working on at a park is the accessibility stall at Veterans Park. So if you go down there, you now see a nice cut-in, and for allowing for van access, it's very spacious. And then we did adjust the sidewalk to ramp down to provide that ramp entrance. And we're currently in the process of striping it, so the parking stalls on the street, we will be grinding off a couple of those parking tees to lay them out differently. So we'll be gaining at least another stall or two in that area, but leaving those open area to access that new accessibility parking stall. And now that that's done with one contractor, that contractor will now begin the repair of the damaged sidewalks in the various parks. So you'll start seeing them around town, just fixing miscellaneous sidewalk panels that are lifted or causing potential tripping hazards. And I believe that should be all for the Public Works update.
Great. Any other questions?
What's happening with the landscape architect for Three Weirs and Forrester?
June 6th, that project is scheduled to come back for an update, not specific to the landscape architect. One of the council members had a direct question regarding a comment the attorney made during the previous presentation. So it is coming back to address that question. Once we get that cleared and we answer any questions, then we'll start scheduling the meetings for the landscape architect. Our design engineers sub who did the renderings actually has a landscape architect on board, and they do have the ability to get another member of their team who is CASP certified, not necessarily for parks. It's usually more specific to buildings, but they will help and look into the different requirements from the landscape architect and the park area. So we're waiting on a few things. We do have some things lined up to hopefully start scheduling some sort of field meeting in the next couple months.
Thank you.
Anything else for Jeb? Okay. Thank you, Rosalba.
Thank you.
8C, Samantha, I think we're back to you.
Yeah, so we
Not that
are.
you're busy or anything.
We're not busy.
Of
no,
all days,
we're
yeah,
we're all
all
very
weeks.
busy. We're quickly approaching our summer, and so we premiered our Civic Rec registration system with our summer registration. So our new software, which is going really well, and we're also utilizing it for park site, picnic site reservations, and that is also going very well. And we hope to implement the community center rental piece of that in the fall. So we're still ironing out some technicalities with our finance department around that piece of it. But it went very well. We opened our resident registration mid-April, and then 2 weeks later we opened it to non-residents. We started doing that a year ago based on feedback because of the success of some of our programs, that we wanted to make sure that our residents had time to enroll in the programs and services before we opened to the general public, and that went very well. Our summer camp program was full within probably 90 minutes of
Wow.
non-resident registration opening. We actually have increased our capacity to 70 based on the fact that we have a pretty robust onboarding of staff. So we're seeing a return there to being able to successfully recruit employees that have been a little rocky for a few years. And so we're very excited. Taylor's doing an amazing job, and we also have premiered our CIT program, which is the Counselor in Training program, which works really well in a lot of organizations as a feeder for your future staff. So having them come on as volunteers, but also taking part in learning some really great leadership skills. And so that's a program that we haven't done in a formal capacity here until this year. And we have 11 of those CITs, which is really exciting. They all had to apply and be interviewed before being chosen into the program. So they started last week with their first training, and it was fantastic to listen in on the interviews. When you ask a 12-year-old what is a skill you're good at, and the response is, I'm very fast. It was just wonderful. So it's been terrific, and I think that again, just trying to grow our next generation of staff, but also just leaders in our community. So we're really excited about that. This Saturday is Art Sip and Stroll, so something our department works very hard on. So we have over 60 artists coming into town for that day. It will be very busy, and then it will be over. And we'll jump into our Music in the Park series, Movies in the Park, and obviously summer camp just takes over. But it is already starting to plan for fall. So our rec guide planning is happening now. We go to print in July, and it comes out in August. So we're always thinking ahead. So that would be our fall rec guide of all of our activities, mainly heavy on the Golden Ticket program. So always looking to try to, refresh in that, and, take some of the feedback that we received already in the planned document to look at how we, better serve people in our community with those programs. So, and all at the same time, we implemented a new website. So if you haven't seen the townyountville.com website, it is a new website. And then YvilleParksandRec.com is its own, it has its own cover page. So that our new website that we worked really hard on, and kind of and we talked about this at the council meeting as well, but the future of websites is less graphics heavy because of ADA accessibility. So being able to be utilized correctly by readers and things like that, we're kind of really looking at the way that we present information online, and also the fact that people are doing most things from their phone and not a desktop computer anymore. So really kind of honing in on how we best serve our population, and I think we're doing really well at that. With the new website, still tweaking things here and there. So I think that's it.
Never a dull moment for your staff.
Fun stuff.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Anyone have any other questions or comments, commission reports?
I had a question, Samantha, about the summer camp. it was subscribed very quickly once it opened. How many Yountville residents took advantage of that before it opened? Do you
Yeah,
have any
so
sense?
it was pretty exciting. We had 18 to 20 in each week before we opened to non-resident registration, and those were residents, with the exception of one child who's in foster care.
So of the 70, 18 to 20 are residents?
Yes.
Thank you.
On that same note, are there any Yountville residents in the training program this year?
I think we have two. 2 of the 11
Cool.
are Yountville residents. Yeah.
That's neat.
Could they be suitable members for this committee, maybe?
They are middle school age at current, but potentially in the future.
But if we went to 8th grade as a
Did.
threshold.
Oh, I forgot to bring that back for your approval. That'll be on your July agenda. Yeah, so when we lower the age, potentially, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I will plant the seed for them.
Glad you are keeping that on the agenda.
What helps is the kids that do live in town get older each year, so it does help that longevity.
Does help.
Doesn't help the rest of us in town with longevity, but yeah. That's true. Blue zones. There we go with that whole thing there. If there's nothing else, I think we can go ahead and adjourn our meeting until July 20th, 2023, and it's about 7:22.
Chairman, just commissioner comments or reports. Is that something you want to?
I did ask and I didn't hear.
Oh, sorry, I did not hear that. I missed
I
that.
wasn't
I
formal about it.
apologize.
I didn't say item number 9.
Got it.
Are there
Sorry.
any comments or reports for anybody else? I think we kind of got those covered in with the presentations. Seems. Okay. Thank you.
So we need to.
Make a motion for someone to adjourn our meeting today?
moved.
Second? All in favor? Oh, sorry, Eddie's turn. Sorry. Aye. Thank you.